Well, here's the meaning of a fraction part 3. In part 1, our wholes were circles, whole pizzas, whole pies. In the meaning of a fraction part 2, our wholes were rectangles. We talked about rectangular chocolate bars and being able to break them into parts. In both of those, we started with a picture and ended up with a fraction that told the same story as the picture. Now what we're going to do is flip that on its head, and we're going to start with a fraction, and we're going to come up with a picture of what does that mean. So, remember though, most important thing, what does the top number of a fraction tell us? Sorry, let's start with the bottom. The bottom always tells me number of parts to make one whole. What does the top number of a fraction tell me? The number of parts that we're talking about. So, where do you find fractions in your home? Well, probably the most common place you find fractions in your home, if you're a baker or a cooker, is your measuring cups. So, let's say you reach into the drawer and you pull out a 1/2 measuring cup. What does that mean, 1/2? Well, first of all, it's 1/2 of something. It's 1/2 of a cup. 1/2 of a cup. You might also have a 1/2 of a teaspoon, but let's talk about 1/2 of a cup. So we're starting with a fraction now. We're trying to figure out, what does this thing mean to me? What's the meaning of this fraction? So remember again that this fraction has got two parts. It's got a bottom number, and that's the number 2. What does that tell me? Well, what that tells me is that's the number of parts that it takes, number of equal parts that it takes to make one whole. Well, one whole what? Oh, one whole cup. Okay, so this is not half an inch. It's not half a teaspoon. It's not half a pizza. It's not half a chocolate bar. It's 1/2 of a cup. So the 2 is telling me that it takes 2 of these to make 1 cup. What does the top number tell me? Well, the top number is a 1. So what that tells me is that this is 1 part of the 2 parts that it takes to make 1 whole cup. So if I imagine going into the bag of flour and taking one of these scoops out, how much flour do I have? Well, I've got 1 scoop. That's what the 1 on top tells me. And the size of that scoop is the size that 2 of them would make a whole cup. So if I reach into the bag of flour and scoop 1 of those out, then I've got 1/2 of a cup. If I reach in and pull another scoop out, then I've got another 1/2 of a cup. And we know that when we take 1/2 and put it together with another 1/2, we end up with 1 whole. If I do 2 of those scoops, I have 1 whole cup. Really, that's what the number 2 on the bottom is telling me. 2 of these make 1 whole. 1 whole what? 1 whole pie? No, these are cups we're talking about, measuring cups. So 2 of these scoops makes 1 whole cup. Now, in my drawer, I don't just have 1/2 cup measuring cups. I've also got one that says 1/4. So what does that mean? Well, if I take one of those scoops, the 1 on the top tells me, well, this is one scoop. The 4 on the bottom, though, let's focus on that. The 4 on the bottom tells me that there are 4 parts to make a whole. 4 parts to make a whole what? Well, remember, this is 1/4 of a cup. So 4 parts make 1 whole cup. So if I scooped one of these scoops, I've got 1/4. That's 1 scoop. But what would happen if I took out 2 of those scoops and put them into a container? So if I had 2 scoops, then I would have 2/4 of a cup of flour. What if I reached in and I pulled out 3 scoops and put them in a bowl? Now I've got 3/4 quarters of a cup of flour. Notice they've all got 4 on the bottom because this measuring cup is of a certain size that it takes 4 of these to make a whole. The top number is the only thing that's changing because I'm changing the number of scoops I take out of the flour bag. 1/4 of a cup means I went into the flour bag once, and that's all. And I put that in a bowl. That is 1/4 of a cup of flour. The second one here means different bowl. I went into the flour bag and got out 2 scoops. So I've got 2 out of the 4 parts to make a whole. Different situation, different recipe. It's asking me to go into the bag 3 times to get 3 scoops out. The first scoop was 1/4. The second scoop, now I've got 2/4. The third scoop, now I've got 3/4 of a cup of flour. Now here's something interesting. Let's say I go in and get 4 scoops. Well, bottom number is 4 because I know that. 4 parts make a whole. That's what that 4 right there is telling me. If I went in and pulled out 4 scoops, oh, wait a minute. If the bottom number says 4 parts make a whole, 4 scoops make a whole, in this case, and I went in and pulled out 4 scoops, then how much of a cup of flour do I have? That tells me I've got 1 whole cup of flour. Ooh, and that's an interesting concept because if I go back to the pizza and cut it like that, then we would say, well, that's 1/2 and that's 1/2. But if I have both of those, well, bottom number 2, because the whole's broken into 2 parts. If I have both of those, that means I've got the whole pizza. Chocolate bars, does it work for that? Well, there's the chocolate bar broken into 2, now 4, now 8 parts. Bottom number 8, how many parts to make a whole? Let's say I've got the whole thing. How many pieces do I have? Well, 8 parts to make a whole, that's the bottom. I have all 8. Well, if it's 8 parts to make a whole and I've got all 8, how much of the chocolate bar do I have? I've got 1 whole chocolate bar. So, interesting idea. If the top number of your fraction matches the bottom number of your fraction, it means you've got all the parts you need to make one whole.